nothing in life better than winning. And here at TCU, we've experienced a lot of that lately, haven't we? As you look at those videos, we experienced the win of the Rose Bowl in 2011, one of the most dramatic comeback victories at the College World Series in 2010, and then last year in the basketball team, an incredible upset of a top-ranked Kansas team. Let me just ask you, how many of you guys were at any of those events? Awesome. How many of you were on the field as coaches or players in any of those events? Okay, at least one. We knew that we had one. But what an incredible time we've had here at TCU over the last several years and some of the great victories that we've experienced. But I want to ask you tonight to think about something that maybe you hadn't thought about before. And that is, what did it feel like for those players or those coaches when the cheering stopped, the lights went off, and the celebrations were over? Were those victories as fulfilling as we thought they would be? Well, there's no story that better describes what I'm talking about than the story of my friend Neil Jeffrey, who was an All-American quarterback at Baylor in 1974. You see, Neil grew up in a family of Baylor football players. And so his entire life, Neil dreamed of being the quarterback for Baylor and beating the University of Texas to win the Southwest Conference Championship. Well, through his first 3 years at Baylor, Neil was very unsuccessful in doing what he had set out to do. The only thing he had done is become the quarterback for the first 3 years in what became the 15th, 16th, and 17th losses in a row to the University of Texas. Well, going into his senior year, Neil still had one more chance to fulfill his dream. So in November of 1974, Baylor plays the University of Texas. And just like what had happened the first 3 times that he played them, Texas dominated them in the first half. By halftime, the fans had begun to leave. In fact, the stories say that they even went to deer camps to go hunting instead of staying to see the second half. Well, Neil hadn't given up hope. And in fact, he came back in the second half. The first possession, he drove the Bears down the field to score a touchdown to make it 24-14. For the rest of the third quarter, it was back and forth, back and forth. As the story goes, Neil goes on to have the Baylor Bears come back to beat the University of Texas 34-24. So what happened next was really what's important, because Neil began to celebrate, as did all the fans, this great victory that became known as the Miracle on the Brazos. In fact, the president of the university promised the students that if Baylor won, he would leave the scoreboard on all night and that he would sleep on the 50-yard line. It'd be pretty fun, wouldn't it? So Neil goes out and he celebrates with his family and his friends and his fellow teammates, and somewhere about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, Neil remembers that the president is at the field. And he thinks what fun it would be to go back and to relive some of those moments. So here he is on the Baylor field at 3 o'clock in the morning. And he says there's running plays like, to the president. The president's running the out pattern or whatever it was he threw on that big 4th down play. And they had a lot of fun with it. But then a couple of hours later, just before sunup, Neil says that he found himself sitting in the stands in a quiet place, all by himself. And as he did, he said the 3 words that came to him. And I've lived this story with Neil a few times, so pardon my emotion when I think about what he was experiencing. But what Neil said that he saw was 3 words that burned in his mind. And the 3 words were, "Is this it? Is this all there is in life?" Because he had achieved what he thought was the highest accomplishment that he had driven to do. Well, the good news is that Neil used that as a catalyst. Right there at that moment, he began to redefine the scoreboard that he played the game of life to. Today, Neil is almost 60 years old, and he has led an incredible life of impact. He is one of the greatest husbands, fathers, influencers of people. He's mentored young men and women for the last 30 years, doing incredible things. So that catalyst, that defining moment for Neil turned into something great. You know, we could stand here all night and share stories of other actors, athletes, businessmen who've had similar experiences, couldn't we? You can probably think of people right now that chased a dream, climbed a ladder, did whatever necessary to try to get to achieve something that they'd always dreamed of, to find that it didn't fulfill. Well, I'd rather tell you some stories very quickly of people who did define the scoreboard the right way to begin with. And the first is my wife, Antoinette, who went to school here. Antoinette excelled at everything she did. Academically, she was outstanding, earning a scholarship to go towards her master's degree. She taught here at the university while she was in graduate school. She was actually the captain of the Showgirls, and an extraordinary person. She went on to start her career, and within 7 or 8 years, Antoinette had already worked her way to be the special assistant to the chairman of a very large national organization. And she could see with some good visibility how she would be his successor. But she chose to step away from that career because it wasn't the scoreboard that she was working towards. And in fact, what she's done for the last 20 years since leaving that, of growing up two of the most awesome girls that you could have in Morgan and Katie, has been way more important and was really what she intended to do. In addition to that, she's also impacted young women and older women through the ministry that she's involved in and all the work that she does. So Antoinette had a winning scoreboard that she allowed to drive and to define her life. The next person is the guy that I think is the best baseball coach in America, and that's Coach Schlossnagle. You see, by appearance, a lot of people might think that Jim is all about wins and losses, going to Omaha, winning national championships. But what I know, because I've spent a lot of time with him, is that he is more about having the opportunity to impact you guys on and off the field in a way that will change the rest of your life. He's also passionate about being a great husband and a great father and a great friend like he is with me. The third person is also a coach here at TCU. And again, I would say by appearance, it might appear that he is all about wins and losses. But as I read an interview from Coach Patterson just this summer, he said when asked the question, how do you want to be remembered? He said, I want to be remembered as a guy that impacted kids in a positive way and happened to win a lot of football games. He said, in fact, that if a person was defined by the wins and losses only, that would be a very shallow life or a very shallow person. I would say that would be a very unsatisfied, unfulfilled life. So 3 great examples of people who have defined their scoreboard as being a winning scoreboard that will lead to a great life. Well, I have to admit to you that for much of my life, I didn't play to a winning scoreboard. See, I was a lot like Neil Jeffrey in that I grew up in a family of athletes. And so from the very earliest of my days, what I can remember is that everything was about numbers and wins and losses. After every game, the first question I would get from whoever I met, whether it was my parents or anyone else, it was, did you win? Second was, did you get any hits? Or did you score any touchdowns? How many yards did you gain? What's your batting average? So it didn't take me long. You know, by the time I'm 7 or 8 years old, I've figured out that that's the way that you get appreciation, you get pats on the back, and you get approval, is to perform. Well, unfortunately, what that leads to is a lifetime for me. For the next 20 or so years, everything became about competition and performance. As I started my career, it was very much the same. I went into my career, and it was all about how fast can I get from this position to this position to this position so that I can make this much money to this much money to do larger and larger deals. So what I would tell you is after 20 plus years, it can take a toll, okay? Now, let me just step aside and say for a minute, though, that it's not all bad, okay? Because that sounds a little bit like the last, the 20 years until I was 35 years old was a bad thing. It wasn't. It wasn't a bad thing, okay? In fact, it was some great things. When I was growing up, I certainly had lots of accomplishments, lots of success. When I was in high school, I was good enough to be one of you guys a couple of years later. In fact, one of the things back when I played, still with a wooden bat, believe it or not, I led the team for 4 years in home runs every year. I hit almost 500, just under 500 as a career average in high school. Hard to believe, isn't it? We actually had the opportunity to do scholarships in both football and baseball from a number of different schools. I came to TCU because I thought it was the best place to play. All right, so when you're my age, you start looking for ways to prove that you did in fact play, and someone saw this and they said, I'm not sure you're trying to prove you played or if you're trying to disguise yourself, so just real quick, I want to be sure that you can recognize me. So do I look the same? I mean, come on. I might have weighed about 20 pounds more back then, too. I don't know if that's the photography or if my weight. But what I would tell you is that there were great times. But they were not times that would last, okay? Because in seasons where I hit 300, things were great. But in the season when I hit 250, it was awful. Weeks when I went, over, it was a bad week. And it was not a great way to live life. So, as I said, I pretty much approached my business the same way. So let me give you a little bit more of a background. I left TCU after getting a degree here in the business school. I got a degree in finance. Very well equipped to go out into the marketplace and to do something in the business world. I started out in the banking business for a very short period of time, for about a year. And then the thing that I'd always wanted to do was being in the energy business. But it was an awful time to be in the energy business because 1984, if you were to go look at it, oil prices were about $10. Today they're about $110. But somehow I found a way to get into the energy business, and I started to work towards what has become, I think, a great career. By the time I was 29 years old, though, let me tell you that I was so driven, so ambitious, so desiring to go fast that I didn't think anybody could go fast enough so that I felt like I needed to start a company. And it was so hard to believe that I had nothing. I had no financial resources. I literally just had a dream of going out and doing something significant and the ambition that fueled that dream. So when I was 29 years old, I started the predecessor to Crosstex. For the next several years, we did some small things and continued to grow. As we started to do bigger things, I needed a partner. So a couple of years into it, I brought in a partner. It was a company called Comstock Resources. And we actually merged with Comstock Resources and ran ourselves as a subsidiary for a couple of years. But after a couple of years, what I realized is they didn't want to go as fast as I wanted to go. Because, see, I was driven to create something significant, to do bigger and bigger deals, and they wanted to go slower and do more modest deals. So I decided that I needed to change partners. And in 1996, I began a process that known as a management buyout, which means essentially buying out your partners. And after about 3 or 4 months of a brutal negotiation, of a brutal process of broken relationships, because obviously when you're getting a divorce, it's hard to keep things in a positive way. But we finally got there. On Thanksgiving Eve of 1996, we reached an agreement with our partners to separate, to create Crosstex. So on Thanksgiving Eve, that night I go to bed, and you would say we had won our Rose Bowl or our College World Series. But as I lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. And in fact, there was a point in time where I finally got up and I started seeing that scoreboard, not a lot like what Neil saw. And the question I asked is this it? Is this what I really want my life to be defined by? The pursuit of more, the pushing, the broken relationships, the challenge of trying to always accomplish more. Fortunately, a lot like Neil did, I used that as a catalyst. That night, I didn't go back to bed. I stayed up and began to develop a plan for what the rest of my life would look like. So the good news is, by the age of 35 years old, 17 years ago, I had had enough pain, enough striving, enough experience to realize that I needed to redefine my scoreboard, to live by a winning scoreboard. So let me share with you what that process looked like. I won't tell you that this was what it looked like the night when I finished. About the only thing that I had done was to define what I would say is the desired outcome, and that is right in the center of the page. What I said I wanted to do was to define what real life meant for me, and that it wasn't about more money or more pipelines or more people in the form of employees. It was about experiencing real life. And real life to me is something that you do with other people that is truly lasting, joyful living. Okay? Well, the first thing that I realized I needed to do in order to do that is to allow my faith to impact every aspect of my life. It needed to define who I was and who I wanted to become as I pursued every day becoming more like Christ. The second thing I needed to do was get the roles in my life right. Okay? So instead of giving everything towards business, I needed to first and foremost lead my family well. As a result of the winning scoreboard that we have as a family, we have enjoyed some incredible times of loving each other, loving the journey, and enjoying the experience of life together. Third, I realized that I had neglected the second greatest gift that God gives us, and that is the gift of friendships and family. You see, God intends for us to do life with other people, to enjoy the journey, to be an encourager, to be encouraged, to have people be, your cheerleaders when you need them. And so I got that at this point in time. The last thing, and it really is number 4 in the things that I think about of my roles in life, and that is I am a businessman. I am a leader, one of the leaders at Crosstex. And as that, I have a responsibility. We have over 800 employees today, and I have a responsibility to lead well. Just like Coach Schlossnagle would say that, he needs to lead well so that you have great experiences that impact. I feel the same way about my job at Crosstex. It is my job to define the culture. It is my job to be a servant leader. We have been running Crosstex over the last 17 years, playing to a winning scoreboard. And let me share with you what that looks like. First of all, you'll see the consistency in the more life in the middle. When we started the company in 1996, there were 3 things we were passionate about. One was about giving more life to our employees through the experience of working with the company. Okay? And that one stands out above everything else that we do. In fact, at the company today, we have outside of all of our employees' doors little magnetic strips that we call our More Life boards. And on those boards, we ask people to put on there what represents life or more life to you. So from the very beginning, that's what we have been targeting as the number 1 desired outcome of the company. Secondly, we are passionate about providing a better quality of business for our customers. And thirdly, a value creation or return for our shareholders. Just like in football, you got to have more wins than losses in order to be relevant and to maintain the opportunity to impact lives in a positive way. You've got to win in business by creating value. So as we look at the company, the second thing we do is we focus on our core values. In the upper left is what we call our employee focus. Everything we do starts from the question of how will this impact our employees? And if we can answer that in a positive way, then we can continue moving forward. We appreciate our people. We always want them to be informed by answering the 4 questions of where are we going, how are we going to get there, what's your role, and what's in it for you. So those things are very important as we try to create a feeling of ownership in the company. The second thing is we want to get better every day. And we use the word excellence to remind us of that. Third, I have a motto in life, and that is I want to be able to go back to anywhere I've ever been and be accepted, okay? In order to do that, you got to do the right thing. We use the word ethics to remind us of that. Simply means do the right thing, be able to be trusted, and build everything around a foundation of trust. Lastly, enthusiasm. When you love an organization and the people that you work with, you're going to be enthusiastic. In fact, I've had a lot of people comment that come into our office. They say, it's interesting. I sat in the lobby and it just looks like people move faster. There's an extra energy. And I said, that's because that they love what they're doing and they love who they're doing it with. So this winning scoreboard, as I said, has served us well. For the last 17 years, we've had extraordinary growth. We grew from 9 people who came together in 1996, put their arms around each other and said, let's go do something great, to today we're about 850 employees. We started with about $4 million of total company value in 1996. That's $4 million. Today we're $4 billion of value as 2 public companies. We have the highest, the 99th percentile employee retention and engagement. That means people love what they're doing. They're giving 100% of everything they've got. Just very quickly, what we do, because I know that some of you would like to understand what the midstream natural gas business is. What we do is we simply move energy products from where they come out of the ground, where they get produced, to where they get consumed. Okay? We don't produce it and we don't consume it, but we do everything in between those 2 places to create the infrastructure required. We're essentially a highway between where production gets produced and where it gets consumed. But we do that in a special way that has become really the underlying reason for our success over the last 20 years. Take a look with me here at some of the things that we're doing in this short video. It's been awesome being a part of that and to see what a winning organization looks like over a long period of time. But let me assure you of one thing. No matter what scoreboard you're doing life to or what organization you're part of, tough times are going to come. And if you guys really spend any time looking at kind of the history of Crosstex, in my experience, one of the biggest questions you'd have is, how did you survive 2008 and 2009? You see, at that point, we were almost 15 years into building a company, and we were as close as you could possibly be to seeing it go away. In fact, we started, if you look at the company, we had a stock price of about $7 is where we took it public. We actually took it at 20, but we split it a 3-for-1, which means it was around $7 on an adjusted basis. We climbed to $40 over the next 4 or 5 years. In 2009, we saw $40 become 79 cents. Okay? So you business guys, you don't have to look very far to see that that's a tough, tough time. And in fact, when you get to 79 cents, the only reason you're 79 cents is because somebody thinks there's some option value, but most people think you're going out of business. Well, we survived. And the reason we survived is because nobody ever gave up. You see, we had played for 15 years to a winning scoreboard, and it defined who we are, which was a winning organization. We've been dealt some tough situations, and tough situations will come. In our case, hurricanes happen, fires happen, plant explosions happen, and they all happen to us in a short period of time. And then on top of that, we had the financial markets crash in 2008 that most of you guys would be familiar with. Well, the good news is today, we're still winning, and we're playing to that same scoreboard. So we've never changed. The market changed, and maybe to some extent our luck changed. And so as we sit here today, this is the best time we've ever had as a company. In fact, what I would say is we are in the right energy market. This is the most robust market we've ever seen in the energy business. In fact, in the last 3 years, we've seen crude oil production growth by almost 40%, natural gas growth by almost 30%, natural gas liquids growth by more than 30%. This is an industry that's been around forever, and now all of a sudden we're seeing 30 and 40% growth over a couple of year period of time. So there is extraordinary opportunity. Because of what we've done over the last 17 years, we have a great platform, the right platform to participate in this business and the robust industry environment that we're in. We have the right opportunities because we've executed on the opportunities that have arisen. Today, right now as we speak, we're in the middle of constructing $1 billion worth of assets throughout our different places of operation. We have over 1,300 people involved right now in constructing facilities in South Louisiana. And lastly, we have the right people to execute all of this, because it all comes down to, you can have the best game plan, you can be in the best environment, but it comes down to the right people with the right inspiration, doing the right things to be successful. So things are good at Crosstex, and you just saw a video that hopefully gave you a little bit of a feel for what that looks like. So now I want to take maybe a step back, and let's assume that some of you guys have been operating to a less than a winning scoreboard. Maybe a scoreboard that's defined by numbers instead of by qualitative things. Maybe it's by, a batting average or a GPA instead of the things that we know are important. So let me just kind of show you what the building of a scoreboard would look like. First of all, you got to start with the desired outcome. The best way I can describe that is, imagine yourselves standing here 30 years from now and giving this talk. And you're trying to introduce yourself, and you want to describe who you are and what you've done, okay? That's a desired outcome. Who do I want to be? How do I want to be remembered? What do I want to accomplish? The second thing you got to do is, let me just assure you that what I have found is it works a whole lot better when we want what God wants. You see, I believe there is a higher authority who knows the will that He has for our lives, and when we can get aligned with that will, it's going to be a lot better, a lot more efficient. The second thing I would do is I would focus on the who, not the what, okay? Everything in life, everything that we do today, whether it's in our family, in our business, or in my personal life, it's all about the who. Who am I in relationships? How am I serving? How am I enjoying the journey and doing life together? The third thing is it focus on the qualitative, not the quantitative measures, okay? Focus on your mission statement that you would have for your life. Focus on the core values. What does it feel like in your organization or in your life to be around you? And lastly, define your vision in a way that it's something that if you realize it, you would be glad that you did. Lastly, and this is really important, to do anything else requires a certain disciplines in your life. And so figure out what it is, what behaviors or what actions will result in the desired outcome that you look for. And build a discipline system into your life that will allow you to achieve those behaviors, those actions, and the desired outcome. And the last point there is remember balance, okay? You got to think about all the different roles you have in life, and remember that you have a responsibility for a lot of different places. So let me ask you, as you sit here tonight, And if you have, maybe you wake up tonight at 3 o'clock in the morning. How would you define your winning scoreboard? If you were to be successful against the current scoreboard that you have, would you like the outcome? If not, stay up a while. Stay up a while and use it as a defining moment in your life, like I experienced when I was 35 or Neil Jeffrey experienced when he was 22. And write down the things that you would change right now in order to begin to define your life by a winning scoreboard. Something that if you were standing here 30 years from now, that you would be glad to say you won according to that scoreboard. Okay? Thank you, guys. Appreciate being with you. Brad, thank you. I think we have some time for Q&A. In the business world, you can always anticipate one question is, what keeps you awake at night? Okay? And when I speak to students, the first question I always get, because they're anticipating what it's going to be like, is how do I handle the work-life balance? So here's my answer. Define your scoreboard and be true to it, okay? We all work hard. You know, the schedule that I still keep today is an incredible schedule. The amount of hours that we all work hard. But what you have to do is make sure that you're true to who you are and don't do anything that's outside of that. So how do you do that? How do you ensure? Well, first of all, again, define the desired outcome. Secondly, develop a system. All right? You got to have time to recharge. You got to have time, in my case, to transform my mind by spending time, quiet time, reading, memorizing scripture, reading stories of what, the things that inspire you. So to develop a system. Third, you got to have people in your life that can see it when it's going wrong. And this is probably the most important point. If you've defined who you want to be and you've told some other people, they need to be able to see your life and see when you're off track. Because we can get really far off track if we live in isolation. So that would be my 3 things to think about, Luke. The most important thing that we do, we think, is hire people. And so we are very strict about the way that we go through a hiring process. First thing we do is define the critical success factors. The first thing on critical success factors is culture. Okay? Think of Southwest Airlines. If you have any familiarity with Southwest Airlines, the first thing they do, in fact, they hire to culture above everything else. Well, we're the same way. We're just not as famous about it. And so, that's the most important. Secondly, we're looking for integrity. We're looking for people who, in any moment would not sacrifice anything relative to character or integrity. Third thing, we're looking for people who have excelled in whatever they've done to date. I mean, if you walk into our organization and you've got a 2.2, GPA, you're probably not going to get hired, because we believe that wherever you are, whatever level you've been at, you need to be successful and you need to pursue excellence. And today, I can tell you, for every job that we have that's hiring a new college graduate, in fact, this past year we hired a new entry-level commercial person. We had 100 applicants, probably 10 or 15. Ben knows this because he's a TCU guy, and he knew a lot of the folks that came in. We probably had 10 or 15 TCU folks, but 100 candidates for every job that you guys would be pursuing in our company. So that's a great thing, but it's a tough thing also. When we restarted in 1996, there were 9 people involved in the organization, and when I look back at it, it was not necessarily, we picked people, but it was the people that worked with us at that point in time. We were an existing organization. We just reformed ourselves. But they were perfect in that, one, our mission statement wasn't something that we sat down and kind of went through a process to define. In fact, what we asked was the question of, why do we do this? What is it that we want to achieve? So we were all like-minded. We had incredibly well-aligned intentions. So number one is aligned intentions. You got to have that with whoever your partners are. The second thing is the values need to be aligned. And when we started talking about that, what we found was that these four things, the four E's, our E4 values, were so well aligned with our first 9 people. It's not hard to look back and think about why we were successful going from 9 to over 800 people. And then in 2009, going back to 400 people, and now back to over 800 people. We had a great core group of people. There's one little piece I would throw in, and this actually probably is an additional entire talk, and that is, if you can get with some people who are hardwired differently. You don't want everybody to be visionaries. In fact, you need some people who are good at vision. You need some people who are good at emotion, okay? Some people who are good at execution, and some people who are good at asking the questions, did we do the right thing? Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. If tonight we all said we were going to go to dinner, you know, it's great if you have somebody said, yeah, let's all go to Joe T's, you know, all 150 of us. But it's likely that the same person that said, let's go to Joe T's can't get us all excited. So along comes somebody else who says, you know, in fact, declares, and let's all get excited about it and go have a good time. Y'all notice that. You'll watch that happen. The third thing is somebody's got to say, well, we got to call down there and get reservations, make sure we got a room. And then lastly, there's always that guy that, you know, kind of is asking the looking back questions. Did we do the right thing? So there's a whole study around that that's basically the 4 hardwirings of people. Fortunately for me, we had the first 3 in our first 9 people. I was hardwired to be more of a person of vision. It's kind of about what are we going to do next and defining the future. We had a person who could walk into any room and define the emotion and get people excited about going and move mountains. And then we had a guy that was always asking, what's the next step? What's the next action we've got to take? Unfortunately for us, it took us many years before we got kind of the no guy, the guy that was always asking the question of did we do the right thing? In fact, we didn't get that until 2001, so we went about 5 years until we had kind of sitting at our highest table that person. So I've probably answered a lot more than you wanted, but there's some real value in those hardwirings to think about. In our organization, since the very beginning, we have gathered together on a periodic basis to make sure that people understood those 4 questions and whatever else they needed to know and connect with, including our financials. In the earliest of days, it was done on Friday afternoons. We'd go to lunch, and once a month, and we would basically have that same discussion around the lunch table. Later on, we started going, and on a quarterly basis, we had what we call all-company meetings, and that's what those meetings were. They'd last a couple of hours, and literally we would get on, an airplane or get in a car and drive from location to location, gathering up, 20, 30 people at a time, and having conversations that answers those 4 questions. Today, we do it twice a year. We have over 800 employees. It takes us about, maybe 10 locations. 10 locations for us to gather people in these places. But we think it's critically important that we continue to have people feel like an owner in the organization. It's, if you had the opportunity to get together with Dr. Erickson here and help define where this school is going to go, you're going to feel like you own it. Well, that's what we feel like we need. And I know you guys have the opportunity to do that to some extent, to influence where the university goes. But we need our employees to feel like that because ownership really drives the engagement. As I said, we have one of the highest engagement and retention levels in the industry, and that comes by continually answering the 4 questions. Our deal guys in our organization today bat less than 100. They'll look at 10 deals before they get 1 to work. So, in baseball, if we can do it 3 out of 10 times, that's great. In business, it's probably 1 out of 50. So lots of failures, lots of challenges. Man, there's 2 reasons I wish I could go back and play baseball today. 1, I'd want to play for you. The second reason I wish I could come back and play 1 more year. And that is because I would play to a different scoreboard. I wouldn't have the ups and downs. I wouldn't have the day that, I went 0 for 4 the day before and come out the next day in a funk, because that wouldn't define who I am. What was going to define who I was is going to be giving everything I had in every situation, pursuing excellence in that moment. giving everything I had to the teammates, enjoying the moment, enjoying the experience. I've got a scoreboard that I play golf to today. And I play golf. In fact, just this week I entered a tournament. I've got a 1 handicap in golf. And the scoreboard that I play golf to looks just like this right here. And that's hard for you to believe. But the 4 things that I want to do in golf is I want to, number one, get to know and experience the time with the person. That would be up in the upper left. The second thing I want to do is I want to be an encouragement. I have a goal of leaving every round of golf with the 3 guys I'm playing with being more encouraged than when they got there. Okay, so that literally is my goal. It's not about, trying to hit a 300-yard drive, but what can I do that would be an encouragement? The third thing I do is experience God's incredible creation. Golf courses are amazing. I played last week in North Carolina in the mountains. It was an unbelievable experience. And then lastly, I just remind myself that it's not about a score, okay? It's about the experience. And then right in the middle, I've got to hit a golf shot. So for about 30 seconds, when I see the yardage, I turn it on, I hit a golf shot, and then I go back to the other 4 things. I'm playing the best golf I've ever played in my life, and I've redefined that scoreboard about a year ago. So, Coach Schlossnagle, I think you know where that started. We were both involved in a book called Golf Sacred Journey, 7 Days in Utopia. Great book. At the end of the book, I picked up the phone and called the author and said, how do I get some of this? And he said, because what I said is, when I want to play my best, I play my worst. And his question was, why do you play the game? Okay? You could ask that question to every person in this room. Whatever game you play, the game of business, the game of baseball, the game of golf, if you can answer that question in the right way, why do I play the game? You've got a chance of being more successful. And that's what I think would keep you on an even keel in a game that, celebrates a 300 average. I had a mentor that for some reason, when I was about 15 years old, he had just come, so he was 6, 7 years older than me. He'd just graduated from Texas A&M University. I'd known him my entire life. He was 7 years older, the star athlete in the town I grew up in. Part of the reason that I was, trying to accomplish and pursue is I wanted to be like him. He came back and he said, you're going to do great things, and I'm going to help you do that. He was in the energy business. And I spent the next, 6 or 7 years kind of sitting at his feet learning about what being successful in life. And to this day, he lives to a winning scoreboard without any question. One of the most successful people that I know because of all the things I've said are important in being successful. So he kind of pulled me into the energy business. Other than that, I grew up in a small town of about 1,500 people. Had no idea what the energy business was, except that my mentor went into that business, and he said, you need to get in this because this is a great business to be in. Thank God, because it's a great place.